Well, I was doing one, but apparently I couldn't be heard, so I hope I can be heard on this one. And I hope whoever I left in the one that didn't work finds his way here, or, well, maybe another time. So, hmm, I actually got into a meditation last time, and I might keep doing that unless somebody shows up. The only thing is, I have to track if anybody does show up, so I guess I'm going to try a sort of sitting. Oh, great, you can hear me. Fantastic. Okay, so Metamodern Yoga. Metamodern Yoga, it's a placeholder name. I don't know what to call it better yet. But the theory is that you develop the physical body, the emotional, psychological development, and the mental development all at the same time, as well as something like behavioral development. That is, how the organism and the environment interact. And some people are really good at one of these. A lot of people who are geniuses in some way are geniuses in the sense of being good at one of these. They might have behavioral excellence or psychological integration, Jungian individuation, excellence. Actors tend to develop that kind of thing. Other people have mental development. That's like the Buddhists' emphasis on the mind and enlightenment. But you can get enlightened without finishing your shadow work. So enlightenment does not suggest that you couldn't develop in other ways. And your physical development, athletes, and so on. And if you're really good in any of these, there's a sense in which you feel awake in a way that other people don't have access to. If you have a really well integrated athletic body, you're free to move and to feel in the environment in a way that others aren't. Or you've reconciled more of the shadow and the ego, the masculine and the feminine, and the Jungian individuation. And you have a range of human expression that's not available to everybody. Or there's the mental development, which, you could be like enlightened. Or there's behavioral development. You could be like a saint or an entrepreneur or like a charitable type person. And it often seems that people who are excellent in one of these four ways have shadows that counterbalance their excellence. Like in some sense, you'd think these would be our go-to people to solve all of our problems, and in some sense they are. But on the other hand, none of them are capable of solving all of the problems we can't solve right now. We can't go to somebody really well individuated and ask them, hey, based on your psychological excellence, can you tell us how to solve the energy crisis? Maybe they have some insights, but it's not enough. And the enlightened people of the world, they don't seem to have solved everything. Maybe they don't choose to. But no, I think that, they just mostly it's a very complicated problem, something like the energy crisis. They don't know how to do it. Athletes and so on, they can be very good at performing in certain ways, but it's common for them to also have physical health problems, either later in life or even on this during sort of in parallel with their athletic excellence. Gurus and teachers and these sorts of people often have behavioral scandals. So it seems that the current paradigms of development are such that people only develop in certain specialized ways at a time. What they do develop sort of gets counterbalanced by a negative shadow. And so the idea of metamodern yoga is you have to develop in all of these ways at the same time in order to avoid developing a significant shadow across the development process. That if you develop only in the mental direction, you'll create a shadow that will anchor you down and make it harder and harder for you to develop further. And that's why, in the Buddhist paradigm, they say it takes many lifetimes of meditation to get enlightened. It's like, is there no faster way? It's like, well, when you go farther in that direction, you start to make incremental progress. You have to chip away at it very slowly, maybe even over lifetimes. But what if you could integrate the shadow of it? Get rid of all of that friction and resistance, that anchor, and then go back and find that you can develop quickly and freely again. And so the idea is development in any direction, in any of the four axes of human existence, creates a shadow somewhere in one of the other four. And then the idea is simply make sure you integrate that shadow, and that'll create a shadow somewhere else. And then you integrate that. And if you do this in a sufficiently interconnected process, then I think you go through something like an annealing process. Annealing is a metallurgy term. And the idea is that you heat metal up. And once all of the molecules in the metal are sort of hot and ready to be moved and shaped and molded, you slow it down slowly. You slow it down, you cool it down slowly, because if you do it too quickly, then some of the molecules will be oriented this way, some of them that way. There won't be a lot of correlation between them. By doing it slowly, they tend to settle into configurations that are more efficient and, in the case of metallurgy, stronger than before the annealing process. And QRI, Qualia Research Institute, talks a lot about annealing in the brain. But I wonder if the annealing metaphor applies to a lot of the body: muscular development, could be fascial development, skin development. I mean, it could basically end up being everything. But the idea being that the body already redesigns itself, remakes itself all the time. It's just that it does so in a lossy way that in the long run means aging wins out and you die. But the body's already pointing at a sort of self recreation, and it remakes all of its systems and structures. And in some cases, it makes them better and better. People have big breakthroughs of one kind or another. So basically, what I'm getting at is there seems to be a way for the whole being, the physical body, the emotions, the mind, the mental, the behavior, to integrate and align in a way that's similar to an annealing process and crystallize and recrystallize fractally in order to do something like achieve more computation out of the same resources. So we're back on the theme of something like increasing flow states. And this is a theory. Yeah, that's another way of talking about metamodern yoga. It's a theory of how to keep reshaping the body, the organism, with itself, using the tools it already uses to do this, to increase computational flow and efficiency in a way that increases development in every direction. But you might say that the enlightened already have cultivated extremely efficient flow states. Can you ever really get beyond that? And I would say I suspect that those who are enlightened end up with different power levels, so to speak, of flow state. Somebody might have a 7, somebody else might have an 8. Why? What makes the difference? Well, the exact idiosyncrasies of your particular organism and psychology determine how much energy ends up flowing. And you can be enlightened, and that has maybe some very interesting effects on the system, and maybe it has something to do with making the processing of the body circuit like rather than ratchet like. When you ratchet a system up, it's this very incremental sort of one little gear at a time. Whereas the alternative is this idea of something more sort of explosive and self sustaining. And so part of the theory is you can only increase those flow states so much. You can only increase the processing of the organism so much if you limit yourself to the mind, to the mental layer. Because ultimately, whatever is going on in the mental layer, in the nervous system or the brain or whatever it is, that somehow leads to enlightenment experiences and increased flow states and computation and all that. Somehow it ends up it's being instantiated physically somehow. It's ultimately about molecules, cells doing something with each other. And so if you're only changing the mental layer of being, then what you're doing is you're changing part of the body, part of the organism that corresponds to the mental layer. And then there's the emotional and the physical layers that you're not allowing to participate in the process. And so even if you expand, and you do the whole mental layer, then you hit a wall because you're not doing the other layers. Because there are no real separations in layers in the organism. What we're calling the mental layer, something in the nervous system, it's a nervous system, it's cells, it's right there and it's physical. And what we call emotional is probably also part of the nervous system. And maybe it's intertwined with the cardiovascular system and the hormonal system and maybe just everything. But then you have, the physical layout of the body, the fascial, the tissue, the fascial tissue, the blood, the muscle, the bone. These are more, grosser, heavier tissues that we don't think of as being susceptible to meditation in the same way. We're used to the idea that meditation might be able to have subtle effects. It can literally increase brain growth. I mean, yeah, what they're telling you is what it feels like on the inside to get your brain to grow in new ways. That's pretty incredible. But if you want the process to continue, then it has to be able to go through the whole mental layer and the whole emotional layer and the whole physical layer. And maybe it stops there, but I've hypothesized that maybe imagine you align the electromagnetic field of the whole body, supposing that's a sort of a good thing on some level. So you might have this perfect, um, it sounds weird to talk about it electrically, but it is electrical in some sense. Like your acidity alkalinity is ideal and it's integrated across the body well, suppose. Um, if you're standing on the environment and it has a very different electromagnetic field, I don't know, whatever, polarity, then there's a separation between you. And at the point of contact between you, I suppose there's some kind of friction. And so if you're really going to keep getting rid of the friction that's part of the organism's experience, then you might have to keep going on into the behavioral layer and act upon the environment and relate to it and integrate with it. And maybe that's in some sense how you continue doing flow states. We talked about extensions of our organism, our consciousness, our intelligence, things like our smartphones. If you define a flow state by the amount of effective computation that gets done, then you could use a tool like a smartphone to get more work and computation of a certain type done and call it part of the system in some sense and say that, yeah, if you want to keep growing the flow states, then at some point you need to get it in interaction with the environment. Although the other theory is that you can just keep going in and in and in more and more fractal. Fractals can go forever, maybe. Leverage an audience, yes, yeah. Yeah, if you can trigger computation in a group, then all that computation, you as the trigger of it, maybe that has something to do with this continued growth and alignment. I don't always know when you're there because it says nobody's watching right now, but then I see you comment. Now it says somebody's here. Niche spheres on X say, attention is the new gravity. Gravity, huh? There's that one scene in Interstellar that I found a bit cringe when I watched it, when it first came out, where she's like, maybe love is the one thing that can transcend time and space. And it's like, what are you talking about? Nothing about the gravity or the speed or the physics we've looked at here has anything to do with love. But it's funny how, to some degree, in our materialist perspectives, we act like we're still back in a billiard ball sort of universe, bouncing atoms around. I don't know. Sometimes I think that Richard Dawkins's philosophy is sort of built off of that idea, that level of understanding of physics. It's like we've already known for a long time it doesn't work that way. And so it opens things up to more metaphysical questions, in the sense that you have to wonder how things like attention shape experience and even the physical universe. So attention as the new gravity, attention as, memes that have mimetic gravity, i.e., the ability to get attention on themselves. That's maybe the essential dynamic that defines the landscape of mimetic competition, or it does at the first level, maybe. So I could see why attention as the new gravity could make sense, although I'm not 100% sure I know what it means. And I'm interested in what you mean by niche spheres. If there are like insightful niches on Twitter I should be a part of, do let me know. I've been on there very just in the past month or so. I've got on Twitter, and I'm mostly in the teapot space, if you've heard of that. This part of Twitter, teapot, is an acronym. So I think I'm going to wrap up a little early, but as a final point, I'll say that I'm in discussion with somebody to organize a Metamodern yoga class. This is my personal development practice. It's for developing the physical body, theoretically in a very holistic way. There's really no part of health that gets left out. Do things get hit unevenly? Possibly, but in theory, it's holistic. Yeah, by all means, find me on, I don't know, Twitter or Facebook. Um, Chase Quas. I mean, I might be able. I'm sorry. I guess I shouldn't say your name. Maybe I should delete the stream. I don't know how to. I'm learning how to manage these things. No, no. Well, I guess you use your public. This is the name you use publicly. So there we are. Um, but yeah, we're thinking about doing a class probably sometime this week, and I'm looking for students because I've been developing the system for about 18 months, but I have very little experience teaching it. And so I'm going to be new at teaching it. So I need people who are willing to, bear with me and be potentially participants in the teaching sort of design process. Like, what is the right way to teach these essential moves and get people to the point where they can put everything together? Because the idea is there's a natural track, telos, or point of gravity in your body, in your organism, that if you can you can sort of ride it. Nice. You want to teach it philosophical. Is it, it doesn't have a physical element like metamodern yoga, right? Or does it? Yeah. Well, if you want to teach it, I mean, I'd love to, encourage you to put together whatever, I don't know what is separating you from here to actually doing it in a sort of minimum viable product sort of way. But I'd love to encourage you to do that. And I might be able to help in some way if you think that would be helpful. But so anyway, the point is this week I'll probably do a class and do recurring classes and see if I can start teaching it. So, okay, fantastic. Well, I'm going to head out, but good to have you by as usual. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow, and good luck with your class. And if you want to come to mine, like, yeah, get in touch. You too. Bye.